Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're powered by CLNS Radio. Today's show is going to be on the NBA draft. I have brought on good friend of the program, Chris Stone, from over at FanSided to talk about a lot of the goings on right now in today's NBA draft scene. Just before this podcast started and just before my cat decided to almost break multiple glasses from jumping from the kitchen table to the kitchen, Zach Collins announced that he is going pro with an agent. Jarrett Allen is signing an agent, and Antonio Blakeney is apparently going pro in some capacity as well. So how are we going, Chris?
I'm doing awesome, man. How are you?
I am much better knowing now that my cat did not just break a bunch of glass.
That's a plus.
Yeah, like there was a major chance that I was about to have to cut this podcast real short, release like a 30-second podcast and just say, hey, bye-bye. But
some people declared, we'll see you later.
Yes, this is news. Some people declared, bye. But no, it's all good. For those of you who are looking for other podcasts to listen to, I did Danny LaRue's show, Real GM Radio. Earlier this week, they're also a member of the CLNS Radio Network. Danny and I talked for 2 hours on the 2017 and 2018 NBA drafts. And then right before this show, I did the Fundamentally Sound podcast with Reegs from over at Barstool, our good friend who has been on the show a bunch of times, and Ben Brust from over at Wisconsin. He is now working in Chicago, like some sort of startup, because he decided not to play basketball in Lithuania anymore. We talked about a lot of fun stuff on that show. We talked about a billion different things on Danny's show. So if you're looking for other places to hear my voice, I don't know why you would be, but those are two great places to start. I released a new updated NBA draft big board earlier this week at Sporting News. There's still just a bunch of news just kind of flying around in terms of the NBA draft. But let's start with the big board. I did this with Chris last time he was on the show. What does your board look like before we get into mine?
Sure. I think near the top, obviously, it's relatively similar. We have Fultz number 1, Jackson 2, Ball 3, Tatum 4, and Dennis Smith 5 right now. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the top 5. Yeah,
that's not...
It differs a little bit.
It differs a little bit, but, I mean, you have 4 of the top 5 that I have, and then my 6th guy is your 5th guy. So, we're pretty much all in the same ballpark here. What makes you decide on Josh Jackson over Jason Tatum?
I really like Jackson's versatility just in terms of how I think he can pretty easily fit into an offense with Tatum. I'm a little concerned about how his style of play is going to mesh with his teammates and what his ultimate role will be in the NBA. I think that there is a ceiling outcome for him, right, where he becomes an initiator who is the focal point of the offense and, goes and gets you buckets on possession after possession. But I think that that's the high-level outcome for him, and I think that his kind of mid-level outcomes are a lot less exciting than the potential ones that exist for Jackson. Whereas I think if Jackson doesn't develop into the primary initiator that he potentially could be, I think you still get really great defense. I think you get great passing, and he just kind of fits in a little bit better.
Yeah, those are really good points, and I really like the way that you guys kind of think about NBA prospects, and maybe that's a good place to start before we even get into the big board. The way that I think of, potential outcomes for NBA players is almost like an expected value equation where you're trying, these guys are just so not nearly finished products yet to where you're trying to envision potential outcomes based on the skills that they have now, based on what you learn about them off the floor and based on, what their potential upside is in terms of athleticism, in terms of basketball IQ and everything like that. So can you kind of walk me through what your process is, I guess, in terms of kind of thinking about it from a potential outcome situation?
Yeah, no, I think that that's actually a really good description of how I think about the draft, and I've kind of had a note in a notes file to write something about this in some kind of long form about why I think the draft is all about expected value and why you should consider kind of middle end and bottom end outcomes a little more than perhaps some people do. I think a lot of people get mired in the this is the ceiling outcome and we should only draft for the ceiling outcome, which I think really misses the point on some potential prospects. And so I guess my evaluation process is largely the same, where I want to consider what their ceiling is, obviously the kind of rough percentage chance that they reach that ceiling, and then where they end up if they don't reach that ceiling and how that fits in kind of with the modern NBA. And, you know, later as we get closer to the draft, there are some people who do great statistical work that kind of supports that, and they post that over at Nylon Calculus, and so I always like to give that a read as we get closer.
Yeah, you know, one place that really helped me in terms of thinking of how to evaluate NBA prospects and how to think of, you know, prospects in general is FanGraphs, about like baseball prospects, because, you know, not only does FanGraphs do a lot of great stuff on, you know, the direction of baseball and everything like that, but they also put into context like potential wins above replacement values, you know, on the low end and on the high end. Like, I think that a lot of people would be surprised if they ran through FanGraphs and looked at like the top 30 prospect, I would say, maybe like the number 30 prospect. That guy still has like a 25 to 30% chance for them statistically to put up like between 0 and 1 win above replacement over the course of their first 6 years in Major League Baseball. And it really helps to put into perspective just what the potential downside is for a lot of guys, you know, even maybe outside of the top tier in this draft, but like even those top tier guys like Josh Jackson, I think that he's going to be a really good starting caliber NBA basketball player, but like there are still very real downsides with his game. And that's before you even get into the, you know, and I don't know what to think of the off the floor stuff, but like, what if something was to happen off the floor again? Or what if we learned something else that happened off the floor? Like, there is still a very real potential downside in a lot of these guys.
Yeah, I think that's 100% true. I mean, Josh Jackson shot it well from the college three-point line this season, 37, 38%, whatever it was. But, like, his free throw numbers are terrible. That's historically a pretty good predictor of how well he'll shoot it from the three-point line in the NBA. So that is obviously a skill that like we can't fully project for him at this point. I think that there are some fair questions to ask about how he'll translate as a potential initiator. His, you know, handle wasn't always 100%. His pick and roll game wasn't always, you know, the best. And
he's also a much better passer in transition than he is in the half court.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think that those are all realistic questions that you can have about him. And certainly I think that there are very few prospects, even at the top of the draft, who are finished in any sort of way. I mean, I think you can poke holes in all of them. Yeah.
With Jackson, you bring up an interesting point about the jump shot, because I talked about this on the podcast with Reegs and Ben, and it's kind of like at the top of my mind. So I think it's, you know, probably worth bringing up in some way. I'm pretty worried about his jump shot, even though he was a 59% effective field goal percentage shooter on catch and shoots throughout the season. That's like top 22% in all of college basketball. I'm worried how it's going to translate, because it flattens out a lot whenever he's taking shots from above the break. And the mechanics of his jump shot, he did better at getting into rhythm over the course of the second half of the season. But there's a lot of unnecessary movement in the top half, especially going back toward his face. And this is something that, you know, I'm writing about this week for Justin Jackson at North Carolina. I think he did a much better job at getting his hand directly under the ball. And I think he did a better job of limiting motion back toward his face when shooting the basketball. And I think that that's a big reason why he was able to really improve as a jump shooter. So with Jackson, I think there's going to have to be something of a mechanical adjustment where he doesn't bring the ball as far back to his face, because the thing that I noticed with Jackson was Jackson would struggle with his release point and getting that 90-degree elbow angle that so many shooting instructors and so many NBA evaluators crave in terms of, you know, getting the right, you know, release point on your jump shot. Jackson, I think, needs to just reduce the motion going back toward his face. Otherwise, he's going to continue to struggle with consistency. And a lot of his threes this year, if you notice, did come basically right in front of the college three-point line.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of that will be he needs to get some more legs into his shot. I think right now he relies on his arms a ton to just kind of shove it forward. I do think the note about changing his form is interesting. And one thing to note, in the preseason when they asked Bill Self about his jumper, Self basically said, like, we're not going to work on it. And he essentially said, we have him for 1 year. There's only so much that we can teach him during that year. And so we will try to make him comfortable with the shot that he has and make him feel okay taking the shots that we need him to. But we're not going to go in and fundamentally like revamp his form or anything. So I do think that that's something that could still come that Kansas chose not to do with him. And I think it'll be interesting to see kind of during the pre-draft workouts and stuff if any of that stuff starts to shift. Because you could tell towards the end of the season there was a little bit less of a hitch in the shot. It became a little bit smoother. It was still ugly, but it became a little bit smoother. And I think that that's one thing that it'll be interesting to see kind of how he changes that up even as we, lead into the draft process.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point in terms of just everything you just said. That's exactly right, I think. I really want to know who his agent and who his trainers are going to be pre-draft. We just don't know yet. Like, he theoretically hasn't declared for the draft yet. So maybe he'll stay at Kansas and you'll be very happy, Chris.
I saw one of the Kansas reporters said that the only reason he hasn't declared, they said this on Twitter yesterday, is his mom's been out of town. So I think that they're just kind of waiting on that.
I'm sure it is. He's going to declare for the draft. He's a one and done guy for sure. And we'll see who his trainers are. Like, I have a lot of interest in seeing what direction he goes with them. But I think that potential downsides is kind of an interesting place to start with Lonzo Ball as well. Because I would imagine that's why you and I, for instance, unlike a lot of evaluators, have him in the 3-4 range more than in the top 2.
Yeah, I think that that's 100% right. I think that there are some real question marks about how he'll be able to translate against NBA athletes and how his jumper will translate. And, I think that there are also some fair, questions to ask about what his best position will be in the NBA, given some of the things that he excels at, to be honest with you.
See, this is something that I talked about with Danny on the Real GM podcast. I think he's definitely a point guard. But what is your argument toward what his real position is and wondering what his real position is?
So I think it's totally feasible that he could be a really good point guard in the NBA. But I also think he has a lot of really great value away from the ball. I understand that might take away a little bit of his passing ability, which is totally fair. That's his best asset. But I still think, in the flow of a modern offense, he's going to get plenty of chances to whip the right pass to a teammate. The two things that stick out to me about his potential away from the ball, or even in like some kind of like 2-point guard lineup, right? Maybe he goes to the Lakers and plays with D'Angelo Russell or something. One is his shooting ability, I think, is obviously a little bit better off the ball than it is on the ball, just because there's less of a risk of, disrupting that odd motion. And with the distance that he has on his jump shot, I think you can warp the floor a ton with where you space him off the ball, right? Because they're going to have to guard him well beyond the 3-point line, right? Because he's not just going to stand right at the 3-point line because he has deep range. And then the second thing is his cutting stats are phenomenal.
Yeah.
Just cutting off of the ball. And I think that that's a place where his basketball IQ that helps his passing also plays in, is he just like kind of knows the right times to go to the basket when his defender's not paying attention. And I think that you could see a team really take advantage of his ability to do both of those things, shooting and cutting, with him playing off the ball. And while you lose a little bit of the passing, I think you would still get a lot of it because of how the ball moves in a lot of offenses.
Yeah, those are all really interesting points for sure. What I would say about him as an off-ball shooter is that if you look at a lot of his shots, he really likes to take the rhythm dribble, even off of just like a space the floor catch. Like he really does like to take the left-hand dribble, bring it up to the left side of his face and shoot it. I'm a little bit concerned about how that would work in the NBA. I think that his range does help in that capacity. Like, there are just going to be teams that can't close out quick enough on a 27-foot 3-point shot versus a 23-foot 3-point shot. I'll be interested to see whether or not that kind of translates in the same way. The bigger thing for me is that I think it's going to be a thing of ego. I think that he's just going to want to be the point guard. You're also going to run into all sorts of issues if your team is bad and play him off ball, because LeVar will not shut up. And NBA teams don't want to deal with that in some way. And I understand, on some level, they'll deal with it to get his talent. And if they think he's good enough, they will deal with it. But if you're using him as an off-ball cutter, off-ball shooter, I don't think he's worth a top 5 pick.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I would say is that I think his potential as a player off of the ball really just makes him a more viable candidate for some teams that already have a primary ball handler.
Yeah.
So I think if you don't have a point guard and you draft Lonzo, you're going to play him as your point guard, right? That makes tons of sense to me. I think he can succeed in that role.
It gives him a high floor.
Yeah. But I think that if you're somebody like the Lakers and you already have D'Angelo Russell, now, obviously, a Russell Ball backcourt might be a total disaster defensively, but I think that you can feel comfortable putting those two guys on the floor at the same time and kind of splitting ball handling duties like a bunch of these college teams have with 2 point guards, because they're both big enough to do that.
Yeah, it's really weird kind of figuring out how a Russell Ball backcourt would work defensively, because on some level, Luke Walton would then just switch everything. That team would absolutely just switch every single screen, and they'd be effective in that way. And this is something I talked about with Danny again. Sometimes I think that switching defenses can keep lesser engaged defenders more engaged more consistently, because there's just a little bit more action that you have to be involved in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you have to pay attention.
Yeah. Yes, you actually have to pay attention to jump shots or to, what's going on the floor.
Yeah.
So maybe that would help them a little bit. And, I mean, just looking at the way that the Warriors have worked and looking at the way that the Lakers have played this year, that's definitely his preferred defensive style. He would like to switch a lot of screens. So, I think it would work in that capacity, but, I think they'd be a bad team at end-of-game defense.
Yeah, I think that that's probably true. The only other place where I think that this would matter in kind of that top 5 area is Philadelphia, where you have Ben Simmons, who's probably going to handle the ball a ton.
Mm-hmm. Well, Phoenix,
but just about
too.
Everywhere else. Yeah, Phoenix, too. That's a good point.
There's actually, a lot of teams at the top that have a point guard.
Yeah.
I was thought, again, I keep bringing this up. You guys should listen to that podcast as well. But, you look at who has the top picks. So Boston has 45 point guards. Isaiah would handle the ball a lot, and Lonzo would play off the ball a lot. I think that if he went to Boston, there's not really a doubt about that. Phoenix has a point guard. The Lakers have a point guard. Philly has a lead ball handler they want to use. Dallas has Yogi Ferrell, and Yogi Ferrell is the best. But really, Charlotte, if Charlotte was to move up and get Lonzo, they have Kemba. Denver has 2 other point guards in Emmanuel Mudiay and Jamal Murray. Miami, if they were to move up and don't make the playoffs, I mean, we'll see if they can get in here in the last little bit, the last day, because I think they have the tiebreaker on Indiana, and they're tied with Chicago right now. If Chicago got the pick as well, Jimmy Butler handles the ball a ton. So there are a lot of really good point guards in today's NBA, so it might make a lot of sense for Lonzo to play off the ball, and I do think it helps his floor, but I also just think he's going to be the point. He's going to be a point guard. I think you don't take him at 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 if he's not going to be a point guard.
I think that's fair.
Because Jason Tatum does all of the non-point guardy things that Lonzo Ball does better than Lonzo Ball. But what differentiates Lonzo is that Lonzo's a point guard, and Lonzo can use his preternatural vision and preternatural tempo for dictating offense and dictating the way the game's played to affect your team and affect your unselfish team, or affect the unselfishness of your team. So I don't really buy the whole Lonzo off the ball thing, I guess, is what I'm saying, because you're not the only person that's made that argument. And I think that you, Danny, a lot of smart people have tried to, tell me this, but I don't know that I buy it.
Yeah, I just think it's another kind of tool in his toolbox, right? If we go back to that expected value thing, it's just kind of one other thing that ticks a box and makes his value a little bit better, right? So, like, let's say the athleticism thing is a real problem and he struggles to kind of create for himself. Well, maybe then he's not the best option as your point guard, right? And his ability to do those things off the ball and be really successful at them is one outcome that helps his expected value be higher in the NBA than some of these other guys.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I don't think either of us are downgrading him either due to potential high-end outcomes. Like,
no.
His high-end outcome is like potential top 10 player in the NBA. Like, if things figure themselves out. But we'll see whether or not that ends up happening. One guy that I want to talk about on the podcast today is I want to spend a few minutes on Miles Bridges. Where do you guys have Bridges on your board?
Well, look, I think we moved him up. Yeah, so we have him 10 right now, which I think is up like a spot.
Yeah. So I have him at 9 on my board. And to be honest, I'm starting to wonder if I should have him ahead of guys like Malik Monk and Jonathan Isaac. I think that a lot of people, and not like you guys, because you guys are freaky, pay attention to college basketball like I do, but I wonder if we kind of underrated what he did throughout the year. So I released this big board with one key number on each player, right? Like, I just kind of figured out like a cooler way to kind of dive into these guys than typically just like writing like a 3-sentence blurb on why they're cool. So what I found with Miles Bridges was in the last 24 seasons, he's one of 3 high major freshmen to reach the statistical thresholds of 16.8 points per game, 7.3 rebounds, 2.1 assists, and a 56.6 true shooting percentage. One was Ben Simmons, who went number 1 last year. One was Jason Tatum, who is in the mix to go number 1 this year. No one else has done that, and I understand the concerns with Miles Bridges. Like, he's a 4 that's like 6'6" with a 6'9" wingspan. That's not ideal necessarily. But I think that we might have underrated throughout the season just the sheer breadth of his skills and the sheer breadth of things that he can do on the NBA level. And whenever you combine that with the crazy athleticism that he's shown, like, he's going to be a wild athlete by NBA standards. Like, do you think that there's a chance we're kind of just underrating him, thinking he's like not one of the 5 or 6 best players in this draft?
I don't know that I would go top 5 or 6, but I totally understand the idea of even just bumping him up a couple of spots, which I think says a lot. Like, I do think it is possible we're underrating his game. To give you an idea of just like how good of an athlete is and what people expect out of him, I was at the Big Ten tournament when he kind of ripped that pass from Minnesota at midcourt, and he just had like a free lane to the basket for a dunk, and like everybody in the arena before he went up for the dunk was like already standing up expecting something awesome, which I just thought was pretty cool because of what you've seen from him over the course of the season in terms of his dunks and his athleticism is that they were already expecting him to do something awesome. And I think that you make a good point just about the breadth of his production. I do think that there are some concerns, like whether or not his 3-point percentage will sustain over the course of his career.
Totally
his
agree
free throw
with you on
percentage,
that.
like Josh Jackson's, is questionable. And I think that the size concerns are fair to ask, although they might be bigger concerns if you do things like compare him to Draymond Green, which is like totally unfair to him.
Well, yeah, Draymond has a 7'3" wingspan.
Right.
And those 5 inches, like, significantly help him defend centers and power forwards.
Absolutely.
The thing with Miles is I think Miles is going to be able to defend 4s because I think he's going to be able to keep them off the block. He's just so strong throughout his lower half that I don't think they're going to be able to like pin him deep regularly. It's the same thing with Harrison Barnes, right? Like, Harrison Barnes looks wiry, but he's so damn strong because he has, well, I mean, Harrison has like a fucking huge ass, like to where he's just like able to really leverage his strength throughout his core and throughout his lower half to keep guys off the block, and he's like an underrated post defender. I think Miles kind of has the same thing. Now, Harrison, again, 2 inches taller, 2 inch longer wingspan. But I think that Miles is going to be able to do similar things with his body in terms of just keeping guys off the block, not be allowed to get pinned deep, and not allow teams to really switch against him, like with impunity, I guess is the way to put it. The passing is another skill that I really like. I think that, like, whenever you consider the fact that you're going to be able to play him as a 3 or a 4, he's a really good connecting player as far as passing the ball and creating looks for his teammates. And potentially he can develop the jump shot, because I agree with you. I think he's kind of a fake shooter right now. He has like I don't know what to call that jump shot. Like
I will say his jumper in person looks really nice, but that might just because I think he's lefty, and it just looks pretty.
It's not hitchy whenever he gets into the motion, but I think it's a little bit hitchy getting into the motion.
That's fair.
And then he also, like, the way he stands on his jumper is very odd to me. He stands with his feet like parallel almost, or more parallel than most shooters do, I guess. And that's a little bit odd to me.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, most people shoot obviously with your strong hand forward on your foot, or strong foot forward. I don't know what to think of that. It's very odd, and it kind of makes me wonder what his long-term projection is going to be in terms of the shot. But I don't think he's a 40% jump shooter by any means.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
But you look and you compare him to someone like Jonathan Isaac. What I like about him more than Isaac right now, and I don't know if I like one more than the other, is that Isaac, I consider isolation, pick and roll, and post-up plays to be like creation situations on offense, right?
Sure.
Isaac only 16.1% of Isaac's offense came in those creation situations. That's like half of what Miles Bridges' was. Bridges was like right around 30%. I think it was like 30.5% or so. So I'm a little bit concerned that Isaac is just never going to create offense in any way for himself.
Yeah, that's a fair concern, although I think that the team context that the two of them played on is also relevant there, right? Bridges was basically the go-to option for Michigan State on every kind of possession, and Isaac played with two guys who really dominated the ball and kind of shoved him into a role player role. And so I do think it's tough to say that Isaac won't ever is obviously strong, but I think it's tough to draw too many conclusions about whether or not Isaac has the ability to create in some of those situations, just because I think the situation that he played in did not lend itself to giving him those opportunities.
That's totally fair, but I just would have liked to see him assert himself a little bit more, and I just wonder if he's going to slide more into like elite role player range more than like, potential all-star range, I guess,
Yeah, no, I think that is important, right? I think that there are two questions there. One is, can he create offense for himself? And then the second is he willing to? And I have those same concerns that you do about the willingness portion of that, because he didn't kind of ever, grab the bull by the horns and just take over for Florida State, even if, he wasn't necessarily given the opportunity. What do you think between the two of those? Who do you think has a higher ceiling?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm starting to wonder, because I think that Isaac has a higher floor just due to the athleticism and due to the length.
His defense is like really good.
Yeah.
In terms of what you can get from that length.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Bridges' defense is good. It's not on the same level as Isaac's, though.
And he just doesn't have the physical tools.
Right, exactly. He's just not going to be a guy that can protect the weak side of the rim while also cutting off penetration like 2 through 5,
Yeah.
Man, I kind of am starting to wonder if I think Bridges does. If Bridges just has a little bit more, because I think he's a better passer. I think he's a better primary creator. And I think he's a better shooter, to be honest. Like, I don't really, we were really excited about Isaac's shot early in the year, but I'm not as excited about it after watching every single shot that he's taken this year.
I do think it's interesting that people are kind of just like all in on Jonathan Isaac will be a good 3-point shooter. but he shot like 35% or something like that.
Yeah, on like not a crazy number of attempts. And if you look
at
his,
super low number, and 89 attempts.
Yeah, and I think that like his conference numbers were markedly lower as well. I can look that up while you're talking.
I got you. It's 35.6% in conference, so about the same.
Oh, that's
but
not bad.
Just not a ton of attempts, period. Like 89 attempts is basically nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, this was a concern of coming into his lone year of college basketball, and I don't think that he helped it or hurt it. One thing that worries me in terms of his skill as an offensive role player is that he's not a great passer. Maybe he just wasn't put into a lot of situations to create and, pass for his teammates, but I also don't know that he was actually a good passer either. Like a lot of the times that he was creating, he was solely looking to create for himself. Again, though, the defense is going to give him a certain floor in the NBA. And, if you look at like some of the similar players to him, according to Ken Palm, it's like Chris Bosh, Aminu, James Johnson, Bobby Portis, I still trust to eventually figure out a way to, carve out a role in the NBA. So like, it's a lot of athletic, two-way players. And I think that Isaac is going to find a way to like become a solid defensive player in the NBA. It's just going to be whether or not he can do it on both ends.
Yeah, I think it's totally fair to consider him, his most likely outcome to be an elite role player. I just don't know that I have the same belief in Bridges' ceiling that maybe you do.
Yeah. Let's talk about the two guys who decided to officially enter the draft and, be in it for good. Jarrett Allen and Zach Collins. I have Allen at number 13 on my board. I have Collins at number 16 right now. I think Collins goes higher than 16. I will say that just at the top. If you made me predict right now, I think he goes in the lottery. Which one of those two do you like better?
I like Collins better, I think, by a decent margin. I've really grown to enjoy watching him play, at least for the time that he gets to spend on the court, whether that's due to fouls or just the fact that they had a really good front court this year.
Yep.
His numbers are absolutely nuts for the minutes he plays in terms of what he put together.
Yep.
In per 40 minutes. I think, if I remember correctly, I ran a search in the Sports Reference database for his numbers in 18 minutes or less, and I don't think anybody has matched them.
Yeah,
which is pretty nuts.
I can give you one. He's the only player in the last 8 years to put up a 70-plus true shooting percentage with at least a 24% usage rate with a 9% block rate. So like it just kind of goes to show the incredible level of efficiency that he was able to put up while taking a lot of post-ups and a lot of three-point opportunities. I mean, he shot like 33s this year at least, so that's not an insignificant number. Along with the fact that he was a pretty elite rim protector in the college game this year.
Yeah, I think at this point he's probably the best rim protector in the draft, at least in terms of production. He averaged like 4 blocks per 40 or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's probably right. My concerns with him are that I think he probably has the widest range of outcomes of any player in this draft.
Yeah, I think that's a fair concern, just given that, we don't have, he played, less than 700 minutes this year. And so I think that there are some fair concerns just about, what we know about him and what his potential outcome could be. Like, there's a chance that his foul numbers, that he averaged 6 per 40 minutes, right? There's a chance that he just fouls all the time and can't actually stay on the court for enough minutes, right?
Right. Like, if you look at the way that his career has gone so far, right? Like, in high school, he was stuck behind Steven Zimmerman and Chase Jeter for the first 3 years of his career at Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas. Finally starts as a senior, goes on to become McDonald's All-American. He was kind of a late bloomer as well, athletically. Still very skinny, still not all that, build up in terms of frame. I think that he'll probably fill out pretty well, but it's a concern nonetheless. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, I think that's fair.
And then the other thing is that, and this is something that worried me with Marquise Chris, I worry about guys that don't get a crazy chance to like build up their basketball IQ on the floor early in their careers, like even before they get to college. I don't think that he's a dumb player by any stretch of the imagination, but he fouls a ton. He doesn't pass the ball at all. He doesn't really find teammates.
Yeah,
ever.
Passing is not really a thing for him.
Yeah. But it's just because he's never been asked to. It's not like a situation where he's selfish. It's just like he doesn't really see things on the floor, I feel like.
Yeah, it was a real contrast watching him next to Karnowski, who's like a fantastic big man passer, beats double teams all the time with passing, and then Collins would get doubled and kind of fall apart.
Right. So the question is it too late for those guys to develop those, kind of natural instincts, or can they do it because they don't have a lot of, experience behind them, right? Like they're still learning the game in a way that someone like a Josh Jackson, for instance, isn't. It's an open question. I think it creates a very wide range of outcomes for Collins. If you told me that he was like a fourth big man who played in the NBA for 10 years, I'd be like, okay, that makes sense. If you told me he was like a Miles Turner type player that can knock down threes as well as protect the rim, because the one thing that he does super well that I love is that despite his slight frame, he contests everything.
Yeah,
like
he really does.
He goes up every single time, and he does a great job of staying vertical. He really...
Absolutely.
I understand that he fouled a ton, but it wasn't because he wasn't vertical. It was because he's so weak physically right now that he would kind of get like blown out of position a little bit and then still like kind of jump backwards and get called for fouls.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that fourth foul in the national title game, right? Where he's like fighting for position with Isaiah Hicks and just like kind of has to exert more strength to hold his position and gets called for a foul for it.
Right, exactly. So like, it's like if that guy turns into like a Miles Turner type, like I just said, he's worth a top 5 pick in this draft. If the downside of outcomes comes, he's not worth a first round pick. It's just a really difficult nut to crack. I think he ends up going in the lottery. If you made me say somewhere in the back half of the lottery, but it's not a sure thing that he's going to figure it out. And I think that's why I have Jarrett Allen a little bit higher than him right now on my board. I don't think enough people recognized how good Jarrett Allen was in Big 12 play.
Yeah, he was really good. He hung like 30 and 20 on Kansas. It was great.
How great was that for you, really?
It's awesome. He's really, I think he really did kind of come along in Big 12 play and seem to kind of start to put things together a little more consistently in terms of what he was producing. And it's also worth noting, like, he didn't really have a point guard this season. And I think that obviously affects how well he can be set up, right? There's a difference between, running pick and roll with like Kerwin Roach and running pick and roll with Nigel Williams-Goss, which is what Zach Collins got to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Just so people know like what Allen was able to do in Big 12 play this year, he averaged like over 16 points, or like right around 10 rebounds and right around 2 blocks per game. Like, think about a freshman doing that. Like, if he would have done that against the weaker competition earlier in the year, we'd be talking about him as like a surefire, like top 6 pick, wouldn't we?
Maybe. The one thing that concerns me about him is I don't know how much of that rim protection will translate. So, yeah, he averaged nearly 2 blocks a game, but he played 35 minutes a game, and his per 40 blocks per game is only 2 blocks. And so for a guy who has his size, right, he has like a 7'6" wingspan at 6'11", I really thought that he would block more shots in college than he did. Yeah. And I think that kind of concerns me a little bit, just to project him as a really good NBA rim protector, because I think he was good in college, but he certainly wasn't elite at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think you're wrong to wonder about that. I just did like a quick search on Sports Reference. Like if he had averaged 19, or what is it? It's 16, 9.8, and 1.7 are the exact numbers. He'd be the 7th person in 25 years to do that.
Pretty good.
Yeah, or 7th freshman to do that, I'm sorry. And the number 1 is Kevin Durant. he did it at Texas, and they're not remotely similar players. It's just like kind of funny.
I was going to say basically the same guy.
But I do like what he's able to do. He has an interesting post game. He has a good like kind of mid-level game, and I think he's going to be able to stretch it out a little bit. I don't think he's going to necessarily shoot NBA threes, but I think he's going to be able to be like a good mid-range shooter.
Yeah, I think that that's possible. I suppose that some of that shooting and certainty and rim protection is why I would lean Collins, just because I feel more comfortable with him in those two areas. But I don't think that Allen is lacking those possibilities either, right? Like, I think he has the physical tools to be a really great rim protector. I think you're right about his potential to be able to stretch the floor a little bit. And I don't think that that's wrong. Can I tell you one thing that really annoys me about Jarrett Allen?
Yes.
He sets terrible screens.
Is that right?
They're really bad. Like, he really often just, like, doesn't make contact. And I think that concerns me because so much of what he does is going to be based on setting screens in the NBA. And at least when I watched a bunch of film on him earlier this year, like, they were just not there.
How much of that do you think has to do with having really bad point guards that probably don't really understand how to run pick and rolls?
Yeah, that's a fair concern, and I suppose is something worth keeping an eye on. But it was just something that stuck out about him when I was watching film.
Yeah, I'm interested in that for sure. His teammate is fascinating to me as well because a lot of people are very excited about Andrew Jones for some reason.
Yeah, I'm not there. I'm not there.
Just the casualness with the way that you said that was amazing.
I mean, I get it, like 6'4", athletic, potential point guard, and does some stuff pretty okay, but, like, he averaged 3.5 turnovers per 40, shot 33% from three-point range, and took a ton of threes. Like, that doesn't excite me a ton.
How many of those, like, hyper-elite athlete, slashing point guards that don't really have a ton of feel for the game, how often do those guys work out? Like, I feel like they never work out.
Yeah, and there are a ton of them in this draft. Like, Edmund Sumner, Kobe Simmons probably fits that mold.
Yeah.
Like, there are a lot of those dudes in this draft who I think will probably get drafted somewhere and have a chance, but, like, it's just so rare that they turn into something really awesome.
Yeah, and I feel like that is why I'm a little bit higher on the older class of point guards than that class. Like, I like Frank Mason and Monte Morris more than I like all three of those guys.
It's interesting that you like Frank. I've been a Frank stan since he, came to Kansas because he reminded me of Sharon Collins.
He's way better than Sharon, though.
I know he eventually, but like when he was a freshman,
right?
His game, it was just like this kid has the potential to be like Sharon.
Yeah,
he obviously blew those expectations out of the water. I just have obvious concerns with the fact that he's a 5'11" point guard. And I know that we've had some success recently with small point guards, but I just think that the likelihood of success is so much lower just when you're that size.
Right, and you have to worry about running into unconscious biases here, right? Like, you have to worry about, just because X 5'11" point guard Yogi Ferrell, I don't even need to put next to it, I can just say Yogi, worked, that Frank will work. But you specifically can look at, I think, some skills that Frank has that will translate. He was in the 93rd percentile this year among college basketball players in off-the-dribble jumpers.
I was just going to look that stat up because I knew that's what you were going to say.
Yeah. And
he's so good off the dribble.
Right, and I think he's actually the best in this draft with a 53 effective field goal percentage on off-the-dribble jumpers, which is just an insane number for something like that. And the crazy thing is his catch-and-shoot numbers. Do you know what his effective field goal percentage was on catch-and-shoot jumpers?
I mean, something absurd because he takes a bunch of open threes.
77% effective field goal percentage on catch-and-shoot jumpers.
He had a really ridiculous year shooting from behind the arc, but...
Do you want to hear what they are on unguarded catch-and-shoots?
Sure.
100% effective field goal percentage.
Yeah, he was somebody... I think that there were a couple games late in the season where people were still like going under screens on him, and it was just like, what are you doing?
How
He's
is
shooting
that the
40.
scouting report?
Yeah, he's like shooting 45+% from the 3-point line.
Yeah, no, it's insane. He's good at runners too, good at floaters. I think that'll really help. But the jump shooting is just killer. The fact that he really gets into you at the point of attack defensively, like he's not a weak defender. It's kind of the same thing as Tyler Ulis last year, like except he's way stouter than Tyler was. Like I think that the defense at the point of attack is going to be a bit more translatable for Frank than it was for Tyler because he's just stronger throughout his lower half and he's not going to get bullied by these bigger guards. Yeah, you have to worry. You can't really switch with him on the floor. He'll just get shot over. But
yep.
I like him. Like I have him at like 35 on my board.
Yeah, I mean, look, I love Frank a ton. I don't know that I love Frank as an NBA player, but like the things that you are highlighting are definitely the right things to highlight about Frank as a potential NBA player, right? The ability to shoot off the dribble is huge. The ability to knock down open jumpers is huge. The one thing that would frustrate me is that there are a lot of times when he would get an open jumper and turn it down and drive to the basket, which I think is just like a Bill Self thing that he got beaten to his head over 4 years is drive to the basket over and over again. Yeah. But, you know, I think that those are the correct things to highlight with him. I just, you know, small point guards have such a low translation rate that scares me.
Yeah, and they have a super small margin for error. That's one thing with Malik Monk that scares me. It scares me with Juwan Evans. Monte Morris is a guy that I think I'm a little bit higher on than most people as well. I think he just, like, fits as the prototype backup point guard for today's NBA.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're like all in my Big 12 wheelhouse. And I love Monte. That dude hits big shots all the time. He like led the NCAA 3 straight years, right? And in assist to turnover ratio, he just like doesn't commit mistakes. And I think at some point this year he went like 150 minutes straight without a turnover or something like that, which is just like that's stupid. That doesn't happen. And it's not like he was playing a low possession, slow, grinded out style at Iowa State, right? They got up and down the floor. He had the ball in his hands all the time. He can shoot it a decent bit from three. He's a career 38.1 3-point shooter. Like, I think that you're right that he's a really good candidate to be a good backup point guard. The concerns with him are really just, will he be able to defend, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then the other thing is he had over 50% of his twos in each of the last 3 years. So, like, it's not like he's one of these, you know, very small point guards who can't do anything but shoot from the outside. Like, he actually does have a pretty good in-between game, and he's smart about his shots at the rim, I would say, more than, like, he's a good, you know, at the rim player and above the rim player, you know? Yeah,
I never really thought he was a great finisher at the rim. He's certainly like not going to get up and dunk on anybody. But I do think you're right to say that he's smart. He doesn't take a lot of really bad shots. And he generally, I think, does a good job. He's got a nice floater. He's got a good mid-range game that I think kind of allow him to avoid having to use his lack of athleticism to challenge guys at the rim. Whereas with like Frank Mason, he would just like barrel into those dudes.
Yeah, that's a good point with Frank. I kind of mentioned some of the guys that I'm a little bit higher on than most people. Who are some of the guys that you're a little bit higher on than most?
So I think the obvious one that we have way higher than everybody else for the most part is Mikal Bridges. I think at this point it looks like he's probably not going to declare. Would be my guess, but I really just like the way that he can fit into a system. I think that if you're projecting guys to be 3-and-D candidates, like he just fits that mold well. And I think that there is a very high chance that he is a useful 3-and-D player. I'm a little higher on his teammate, Josh Hart, I think, than most people are. I think that people have started to kind of equalize on the Juwan Evans love. I was a pretty big fan of his.
Where do you guys have him?
In the mid-20s.
Yeah, that's about where I have him.
But I think we've had him in the mid-20s for basically forever. But he's somebody that I really like. I think that there are some real questions with his ability to finish around the rim. I think he was a sub 50% guy at the rim this year. Mm-hmm. But he's got a decent floater. He seems to be able to shoot it, although he doesn't have a ton of high shooting possessions. And like, there are not a ton of guys in the draft who I think run pick and roll better than him.
Yeah.
And given how important that is, I think that kind of sticks out. One person that I'm getting higher on, and I'd be interested to hear your opinion on, is Jonathan Motley.
I've had him in like the 20 to 30 range all year. Not all year. I shouldn't say that. Since like January, so in the new year. Yeah, I'm a big fan. I'm interested to see how the torn MCL, according to John Gavoni over at Draft Express, kind of plays into what his decision is going to be. I know that he's declared without an agent as of right now. He's an interesting guy. He's 6'10" with like a 7'3" wingspan, 9'1", 9'2" standing reach. Really good post game that he improved. He's a really good lateral athlete without being a very good vertical athlete, which is an interesting combination for a center. Because I think that he probably is more of a center than a power forward. Yeah,
I was going to say, I think that's the thing that's kind of like started to attract me to him a little bit more, is I think he's most likely going to end up as a smaller center, which to me makes his offense a little more attractive. He became he averaged 2.3 assists per game this year.
Great passer. Passer.
Like turned into a really good passer. And I think, occasionally stepped outside, at least shot a mid-range a decent number of times.
The shot's pretty, too.
Yeah, I think if you can make him into a small ball center, that's, pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, I like him a lot. The key is just what does he decide to do with this torn MCL. He is just, a really nice mix of, lateral athleticism and skill and passing ability. I really like that. One guy that has decided to declare is Ike Anabogu out of UCLA. I don't think he's declared with an agent yet, but
I don't either.
From what I've been told, he's going. He is going to be in the NBA draft this year. What are your impressions of him? Because I think that even though I'm out here and tend to be a little bit higher on West Coast guys than, maybe what the general consensus is, he's not one that I'm a little bit higher on.
Yeah, I don't know that I am either. He's someone who wasn't even on our board this time, and I said we should put him on, and Trevor was not convinced that he's an NBA player. And so, he played 13 minutes a game. If you draft him, you're really hoping, basically, right, that he can be a pick-and-roll big and block a bunch of shots.
Yeah.
And his per 40-minute numbers, 3.7 blocks per 40, suggest that that's a real possibility, but he's still committing 7.5 fouls a game right now. So I think if you're drafting him, right, he's a really long-term project.
He's a long-term project, and his low-end outcomes are zero. He has his low-end outcomes. He has a 30 to 40% chance of being a zero in the NBA. But if he hits, he's going to be a legitimate primary rim protector who has really good hands and can run screen and rolls. And that's one of the most valuable archetypes of centers in the NBA. I don't know. I don't like projects as much as a lot of people do, including, NBA executives. NBA executives do really like projects sometimes, especially ones with tools like EK. I just don't like it. If I'm taking a guy around 30, I want someone who can, or even around 20, I want someone who can provide rookie scale value contract value. And right. I don't think he's going to do that.
Yeah, is he even going to be somebody who at the end of his rookie contract, what he is in the NBA?
Nope.
Probably not.
He'll be 22 at the end of his rookie contract.
And that's pretty scary, I think, if you're drafting him that high. Because you really just don't have any idea on his outcome. And I know, it's obviously unfair to compare him to somebody who might be a lottery pick like Zach Collins. But with Collins, I think you're going to get rim protection. Collins is a good pick and roll player, that, and he definitely has some range. And I just I don't think that there's anything that you can definitively say Ike is going to do like you can with somebody like Collins or even with somebody like Jarrett Allen. And I think some people have those guys in like a fluid range.
Yeah.
Like I've seen Ike up in the like late teens.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. The last thing I want to talk to you about is the rosters for Portsmouth got released. To me, did you look at those by chance?
No, but I can pull them up.
To me, the roster this year is kind of loaded. Like, it's weird. Like, typically, you'll get like one or two guys at Portsmouth that could potentially be NBA draft picks going in, and then maybe an additional one or two kind of leave Portsmouth as potential NBA draft picks. There's a lot this year that I really like. Like, Kadeem Allen's there, and I think Kadeem Allen could find a role in the NBA next year. Jamel Artis was a crazy productive dude in the ACC. Charles Cook's a nice 3-and-D prospect. Emil Jefferson is there and has been a 4-year starter at Duke, essentially. Malcolm Hill led the Big Ten in scoring for a year and a half or 2 years in a row. Rodney Pryor's a nice 3-and-D prospect. Davon Reed's a 3-and-D prospect.
Yeah.
Andrew White can shoot the hell out of the ball. And then my favorite out of all of these guys, and I think I'm higher on him than anyone is Derek White at Colorado. Derek White this year put up 18 points, 4 assists, 4 rebounds, over a steal, over a block a game. I know he's a little bit older, but he did it on 50, 40, 80 shooting too.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly somebody who can make a good prospect. These rosters, I'm kind of just scrolling through them right now, are definitely stacked with dudes who are going to get an opportunity to play in the NBA.
And that's a little bit rare for Portsmouth. Portsmouth is a good event, and, I think that there are a lot of really good players who end up playing there. But this year's different, man. This year, if you told me 5 kids out of Portsmouth got drafted, I'd be like, yeah, I buy that.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through right now, and just the thing that sticks out to me is there are a ton of obviously older, but pretty big athletic wings. And that is a thing that is in super high demand in the NBA. Mm-hmm. And even if a bunch of these dudes end up going the D-League route, there are names on here that you could potentially see getting called up mid-year for 10-day contracts and stuff.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And it's weird to me that so many dudes are playing in it. Like Fred VanVleet and Yogi Ferrell didn't play in it last year. They were just okay, I'm above this. But there are so many dudes this year who are really interesting prospects that are trying to kind of show out. And, I'm excited to actually sit down and watch these games on YouTube. I'm not going this year, but I think there's going to be actually some really good games that, showcase a lot of really interesting players.
Yeah, definitely. Plus you get another chance to see Naz Long play, and he's awesome to watch.
Why do you like Naz Long?
Because, dude, he's a gunner. He takes, just ridiculous threes. You know how don't you have an affinity for Bryce Alford?
I do have an affinity for Bryce.
So, that's, Bryce. My affinity for Naz Long. Naz Long is, the Midwestern version of Bryce Alford.
By the way, I think Bryce is, a sneaky chance to play in the NBA.
Oh. I mean, I could see it. He can make a bunch of threes, and that's valuable.
That, and he's going to test off the charts athletically. People are going to be surprised when he throws up, a 38-inch vertical leap and, wild quickness scores.
Yeah, Naz Long won't do that.
Yeah, Bryce Alford, and I don't know that a ton of people know this. I tweeted it out before, but Bryce was UCLA's best athlete this year, according to, the BAM testing that they did.
Wow. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And it's not like UCLA was an unathletic team.
No.
So
yeah, they had some dudes.
Yeah. I'm excited to see what he does athletically. I think that he can make himself a little bit of money. Plus, being an Alford doesn't hurt in terms of potentially getting a look that other players wouldn't in the NBA.
Absolutely.
All right, Chris, is there anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
I do a mock draft every week that people can check out, and I'm about to start cranking out a bunch of scouting reports. So I think just check out the Step Back over at FanSided. There are a bunch of smart people there who do, really smart NBA work, really smart draft work, and that's where all my stuff will go up.
Yeah. Chris really does a great job. How he has under 2,000 Twitter followers, I don't know. You guys should all follow Chris Stone on Twitter. Is it C Stone Hoops? Is that right?
It is at C Stone Hoops.
Yeah. Seriously, Chris is one of the smarter people you'll find in the NBA draft.
Thanks, man.
That don't get the attention. You deserve way more attention than you get. I really enjoy your work.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. this has been the Game Theory Podcast. Keep it here on Friday. I'm going to try and do an awards podcast on the NBA. There are so many takes out there about what people should win NBA awards in, especially MVP. Like I've kind of like grown numb to the MVP award race. I feel like in a weird way. They're all just such good, outrageously awesome candidates that I'm like, all right, you can't really go wrong picking a guy this year. But people have like these super strong beliefs on it that are insane to me, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's totally okay for somebody to answer any one of the 4 best candidates and everybody to be like, you know what, that's totally reasonable.
Yeah, but that doesn't happen. That does not happen.
No, I have takes.
Yeah, you do. So I think we'll do that on Friday. Again, the kind of schedule that we're going to have going forward is we're going to have 3 podcasts a week, one on college basketball, one on the NBA draft, one on the NBA, especially throughout the NBA playoffs and everything. I am excited to get this thing going again. And we're powered by CLNS Radio, and I'm glad that Chris came on. And again, you could go check out the podcast I recorded with Danny LaRue, also on the CLNS Radio Network over at Real GM Radio. I would appreciate that. I would also appreciate some ratings, reviews, subscriptions to the podcast. That really helps get the word out about the show. Any way that you can help support the show, either via a quick retweet or whatever, it's really appreciated. I appreciate everyone that tunes in every week. So until next time, we'll talk soon.